oceanic waters of politics only to have it chewed off. There was actually a poll that was done by this firm, Public Policy Polling. And I think it's a firm of young people because they got so tired of comparing Congress's approval rating to the approval, just saying it's like in single digits, how low can you go? Oh, it's lower again, it's lower. They got so tired of that. They decided to compare Congress's approval rating with the approval rating of a number of unpleasant things. So they found that Congress's approval rating is worse than hemorrhoids. It's worse than heroin. It's worse than lice. It's worse than the band Nickelback. The good thing is, at least it's better than meth labs, gonorrhea, and Charles Manson. So maybe we have something to work with. But I do think that women don't often want to be involved in that toxic environment and associated with a profession that is so disliked. I was saying to a number of the students earlier today, there was a poll that was out today that had 7 in 10 Americans not liking or trusting or believing in politicians. So we want to join that club, right? Except that if you don't participate, then we're going to continue to see the spiral, right? So by the power vested in me, I know I have no power as the former governor of Michigan, but whatever. By the power vested in me as the former governor, I hereby declare all of you young people invited to lead. You have to step up. And remember that it is not about you. It is about the changes that you want to make. And if you can raise money for your favorite cause, then you can serve this country. And many people decide they want to serve in the military, and that's a really noble form of service. But if you're not serving as the public lawyer, if you are not stepping forward to infuse state legislatures and congressional seats with the knowledge that you gained here, I'm just saying, we just lose that benefit, and it is a shame for the world. So I invite you all to lead at some point in your life. And for those of you who are more seasoned, you've got no excuse. These younger people maybe have to work up to it, but those of you who've got some gray hair, I'm just saying, you too can lead too, even if it's at a different stage in life than these young people. I do think that women often decide not to raise their hand, and some men feel this way as well, because of the small voice that's on their shoulder that says, I can't do this. I'm going to allow him to have it, or why would I put myself out there? I'm not going to do that. And I often, and again, I had to be asked to lead, so I'll get to that in a second, but I often think about this Ann Richards, don't wait to be asked to dance. And when I was governor of Michigan, there was a great pastor in Michigan. Her name was Mary Ann Williamson, and maybe some of you know her. She's a national pastor. She's a spiritual leader. And she's written a lot of books, and she became a friend because I was governor at the same time she was there, and she helped me with this mentoring program and all of that. And she gave me this passage that she had written in a book, and some of you have heard this before, so I want to recite it for you because it speaks to all of us who have that little voice on our shoulder that says, maybe why am I going to do that? And it goes like this, and if you know it, feel free to recite it with me. It's called Our Deepest Fear, right? Some of you are nodding. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? But actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God, and your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightening about shrinking so that others won't feel small around you. We are born We were born to make manifest the glory of God, and it is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Isn't that cool? Right? I love this. I actually had it on my mirror as I had graduated from law school because I didn't know her yet. I met her when I was the Attorney General, but I still have that voice. And I think that women and men, anybody with that voice has to think about why were they put here on this planet? What are they here for, if not to leave it better than when we found it, right? So, my second piece of advice came from Ann Richards, and that was a good piece of advice. My third piece of advice, and I want to give this to you from me. I often get asked, especially by women, but by men too, how do you have it all? How do you have a family? How are you able to balance it all, right? How can you do all of that? So my advice is to marry well. And by that, I don't mean marry, a wealthy person. I mean marry someone who will allow you to soar. And when I say that, I have to tell you a little bit about my great husband. So my husband, when he was growing up, he wanted to be either Pope or president. And so he went to a Jesuit school, he went to Yale, he majored in theology, he was on his way, the Pope track, whatever that would be, becoming a priest. And then we met, so that didn't work out. He didn't become Pope, but he did become a saint for marrying me. But truly he did. And let me just pause there for 1 second to say, when I say marry well, I want to bow to the women who are single parents, who are able to do, I don't know how they do it, but they do it all. So I don't mean to disrespect at all the women who have chosen or by circumstances don't have a spouse, or the men who are doing it by themselves and don't have a spouse. But if you have a choice and you want to have children, marry well. And so my husband, he is liberated, fully liberated. So men, I think, women have been in a box, of course, we're in a box, particularly, in the last century. But we were able often to step out of the box and make a choice about having a job at home or having a job outside of the home. Men are still in a box. Their box is outside the home. And I think we need to liberate men to give them the space to choose, if they want to be inside the home, to be the primary caregivers. Women will not rise past that 4.6% if men aren't willing to raise their hand, if society doesn't allow men to raise their hand, to be caregivers at home. So my husband was primarily responsible for our kids. Even though, he went to Yale, he went to Harvard Law School, but I'm just saying, this guy, when we first met, this is what he would do. He would press flowers in wax paper and put them in my mailbox. He'd put poems in there. He could play the guitar for hours. He could stare at a baby for hours. In fact, when we play this game at home, name your favorite superpower. His superpower that he would tell the kids that he wanted would be to levitate, if a parent is over there with a baby, to have the baby float into his arms with the parent's permission. Because he just loves baby. So now I, on the other hand, I'm like a list maker. I want to get moving. Come on, let's go. When we went on our honeymoon to Ireland, so I made the list where we rented the car, we were going to drive all the way around the island, we were going to stop, make sure we saw all of the cities, and he was like, the hill, let's climb the hill, let's stop in the pub and watch them play this film. I'm like, yeah. Now, knowing that about the two of us, if you had these two resumes in front of you, who would you want to raise your children? It would be him, of course. And he has been so phenomenal. So I think that having a partner in life who celebrates you for what you bring, with whom you can negotiate these things, not based upon plumbing, but upon competencies, is a really great thing. And I think, frankly, the LGBT community has a much easier go of this particular aspect of things, which is they can negotiate based upon who's good at what, without having to be just assumed that because one has a uterus, one's staying home, and because one doesn't, one's going out. So marrying well is a really critical aspect to being able to lead well and being able to feel like your home life, that you're able to have a rich home life. So I was asked to run. When I was asked to run, I was the Corporation Counsel for Wayne County, and I was approached by the former Attorney General, had been the Attorney General for 37 years in Michigan. He was stepping down. And since I was the Corporation Counsel for Wayne County, I did civil law, and I had been a federal prosecutor, so I had criminal law, so I had both sides. And so some leaders in the party came to me and said, Jennifer, why don't you run for office? And I'm like, I was helping people get elected. I would make sure that I was writing the position papers or stuffing the envelopes, but me running, are you crazy? And he's like, no, really, you should think about it. So my husband and I drove to Chicago from Detroit, and we talked about it all over there. And he's like, this is the time. The window only opens once. You gotta go. Now, our kids were 6, 7, and 10 months old at that point. I'm like, I can't do this, not with Jack and Tim. He's like, I got the kids. You do this. So, with that great support, of course, I ended up running and winning for Attorney General. But it has not been, it's not been easy. It's been hard on Dan because he is, despite loving poetry and playing guitar, he's a jock. And he loves to, he's got a good ego. In fact, when we were doing marriage prep, the priest, he would say, and I wasn't thinking about running for office, but he knew that Dan wasn't going to be Pope now, and so now he flipped the default over to be president or governor of Michigan. And so the priest asks Dan, well, what if Jennifer wants to run for office? And Dan was like sort of taken aback because he was thinking that he was going to do that. But then he said, if she wanted to run for office, I would be down with it 100%. In the meantime, I'm like, well, the priest was right. The priest was very prescient because I was invited to lead. So marrying well is a key component of the freeing oneself up to be able to lead. And I think so much of the reason why women haven't led is because men haven't felt as free to support them. So we've got to support men's freedom in that. I have another Anne Richards story, but I'll tell you that later because I don't know you well enough yet. My fourth piece of advice is really from my dad, and I mentioned this earlier to the group that I was talking to. My dad would say to me always, and my dad is this stoic Swede. I've never heard him utter a swear word. I have never heard him raise his voice. And everyone who has worked with him, the banker, always says, your dad has got such integrity. Integrity is the first word they use about Dad. And Dad would always say to me, do not do anything that you wouldn't want to read about on the front page of the New York Times. And so, as I was saying to a few students earlier, when I was a summer associate at Harvard, and I went to New York City to be the summer associate in this mid-sized firm in Manhattan, and I would get in early to do all the summer associate stuff like copy the cases at the Xerox machine. And because I was in there early, I would see whoever came and went to use the Xerox machine. And one morning, one of the partners came in, Mr. Cummings, and he said, can I interrupt you so I can get a couple of copies in? I'm like, of course, I'm happy to do your copying for you. And he said, no, I would never ask you to do that. He said, these are personal. So he made a couple of copies, and then he puts his hand in his pocket, he pulls out, and he puts a couple coins or a coin on the copier. And I said, well, surely, Mr. Cummings, the firm doesn't mind you making copies. He said, no, these are my tax, these are a couple of tax documents. He said, I would never ask the firm to pay for something that was personal to me. I would never ask you to do something that I should be doing because it's personal to me. And he looks at me, he actually squares me up in front of him, and he says, remember that if you cheat in small things, you will cheat in big things. That, to me, was such a powerful piece of advice that when I went back and became governor and attorney general, we had on our little copy machine the integrity cup that we asked people just as a symbol. I mean, obviously, it was not a big deal, but it was a symbol. It was something we wanted to express the integrity of the values that we had for our office. And when you cheat in small things, you may cheat in big things. And remember that about the people you associate with as well. The next piece of advice is a small one, but really important. And this is true when you're in a position of leadership. When you're in a position of authority, I should say, because anybody can be in a position of leadership, but not everybody's in a position of authority. When you're in a position of authority, it's so easy to assume the position and forget where you came from, right? So Mario Cuomo, my husband Dan was interviewing a bunch of leaders, and he interviewed Mario Cuomo for a book that he was writing on integrity. And Mario Cuomo said that one of the most important things he had to remember constantly was that when he was governor, he was only wearing a suit. That he put the suit on in the morning and he took it off at night. And when people came up to him at parades or whatever and asked for his autograph, they weren't asking for Mario Cuomo's autograph. They were asking for the autograph of the governor of New York. He said, always remember that when you're wearing that suit, it is not you. And if you think you are the suit, that's when problems really start. You have a temporary possessory interest in the suit.